really got that side.
We got this side either, so we're good.
I think we did it.
We did it. Thank you, sir.
And look,
We survived.
we survived.
Welcome to LECOM Health Matters. Our guest today is our frequent guest today, Dr. Jim Caputo, who's in charge of everything relative to a vaccine relative to COVID.
Somewhat.
Jim, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Monsignor.
We're at Shaper Avenue, the vaccine clinic, and it's COVID time again.
It's COVID time. This is the home of vaccines.
The home of vaccine, COVID time. Why should I bother to get another one?
Let me count the ways for you. Monsignor.
That's why we're here. Because this is number 4 or number 5?
It depends on where one is in the process, because our immunization schedule has changed a little bit. To answer your first question, the reason why, one of our primary reasons is when we had the vaccine initially, when it came out, the manufacturers designed a product that would fit the profile of the bug that was infecting us. That profile tends to change a little bit over time, develop some other different characteristics. And so the identifying factors that we use in a vaccine change as well. So we saw our initial vaccine, which we'll call the ancestral version or the original version, which was predominant for quite some time. It's very natural for things to mutate somewhat. They do some on their own in nature. And so we see this. We were able to develop a booster then that covered that version of Omicron. We went through the Delta series and into the Omicron series. And that was available last year, about the same time last year. And so one would have gotten, if you're completing with the entire series, a booster of that version of it, along with the ancestral. Now, our booster that we have right now, it won't contain any of the ancestral variety. That one is one that we've seen, exposed really pretty much all the population to, unless you really just crawled out from under a rock. You would have had basically some exposure to it wherever you went, the grocery store, if you didn't even get COVID yourself. So there's no need to have that component to it. What it does have, though, is the component that was our major player coming into the season right now. And even knowing that there will be some variation, we're still in with a great vaccine from what the clinical studies show, at having a good defense against what's appearing right now.
So this is really not a booster, it's a vaccine.
This is a vaccine. All the boosters are vaccines, and it's difficult, because we're used to getting shots that are something yearly, like the flu shot, or perhaps we get a series of its hepatitis of 2 or 3 shots, or pneumonia that's 2 shots, and then it's over. Unfortunately, COVID has persisted, and it's into a phase where it's not entirely a seasonal virus like flu is. It has components of seasonal, but unfortunately, it still has components of all the rest of the year too. So it's a very weird kind of approach that we need to take to it. And, there's only so much you can do with vaccines, but right now it's still very prudent for one, just because of the potential behind it with things like long COVID. We've talked a few times about COVID. We really haven't gone into things like long COVID. Perhaps we will at some other point, where we have folks that continue with symptomology for months, and we don't know, perhaps years afterwards, that persist: joint aches, inflammation. There's a multitude of symptoms. And we know that getting the vaccine actually is beneficial somewhere down the line for folks that end up developing long COVID. Now, just briefly, with it, folks that do develop it, it can be kind of difficult to identify. We find that folks that get COVID that are even relatively asymptomatic with the disease when they get it develop long COVID. And the ones that are not vaccinated tend to have more in the way of symptoms.
But let's be clear for those who are watching or listening to this. The vaccine does not necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, prevent COVID. It mitigates the difficulty of it. In other words, you may get sick, but not as sick. Is that right?
That's correct. We had a very short window when the vaccine first came out, where folks that were immunized, not all, but probably a very large percentage of them did not develop COVID then subsequently for at least a number of months or a year or so with that vaccine. In fact, so we have a lab at LECOM as well that we developed very early on with the foresight, fortunately, of the folks that do that and plan for it. And we were able to get the equipment and the testing for it. We found that the state even requested samples from us if there was someone that was vaccinated that still got COVID because it was very rare at the time that someone developed COVID. That period lasted several months, but again, we end up having breakthroughs. So those are what are called breakthrough infections. We're always going to see that. And we see that with vaccines. We saw that with the early shingles vaccine, that was Ostrix. We probably won't see it as much with Shingrix, the newer shingles vaccine that's been developed into a little bit better product. But we can get what we call breakthrough infection. Absolutely. What we do know that we still have is that we still have a reduction in hospitalizations, in doctor visits, and in deaths with it. And we have a reduction in long COVID with that vaccine.
So then the vaccine will keep us out of the hospital, to be simplistic about it.
That's exactly it.
So who, obviously, I'm going to say to you, who should get it? And I know you're going to say everyone.
Well,
but who really has to get this?
So the recommendation from the CDC is stated as anyone 6 months or older. Now let's qualify for that a little bit. One always has to look at a risk-benefit ratio, and we've talked about this on previous interviews as well. When we look at the category of individuals that are very young, the benefit tends to be more towards society, family, others than in those little babies and kids themselves, with the exception of, for example, maybe just a newborn, because their risk tends to be relatively low. Benefit risk ratio is a little bit different. As we get a little bit older, folks way older than us.
Much older than us.
Perhaps folks maybe in their 60s, 50s, or 60s, but anyone really with any kind of concomitant illness at any age, anyone who's immunocompromised at any age. And then our group that's, say, 60 or so that presents with really any sort of concomitant illness, that being, it doesn't have to be a respiratory illness. So asthma, COPD, heart failure, diabetes, folks with diabetes, there's some suppression of the immune system that goes along with that.
Clearly, Jimmy, infants 6 months or above, and any senior really needs to get it. When we look at the risk-benefit ratio, unless there is some condition where they've had a previous reaction to the vaccine, it would definitely be indicated for them. Why do you think there's such vaccine hesitancy? I remember when the COVID shot first came out, I remember the news coverage about it, the trucks when it was leaving, Moderna, Pfizer, Novartis, the labs, there was excitement that it was there. And you remember because you had lines of people.
Absolutely. We were lined almost all out to the Bayfront Parkway, double or triple.
And we did it down at the
Bayfront.
Why do you think there's such hesitancy now? Are people just too accustomed to it or becoming too comfortable with realizing it's here?
I think there's a number of factors, and some of these factors play into some concepts that probably go back if we look at the last even 10 or 20 years with vaccines in general. We've seen a decrease in things like the MMR vaccine for kids. And there's a lot of Google medicine that's out there. We have so much information in the internet. It's fantastic, the availability of information we have. Unfortunately, when it comes to medical issues, there's no screening device in there. And so, the value of that information really needs to be taken in light of where it fits into the medical picture. When we look at things like vaccines and immunology and medicine, this is a really complicated, thing to try to explain to people. I think if we would have used the term mRNA or messenger RNA, someone would have looked at us sideways, prior to COVID. I mean, what did you know about messenger RNA?
Nothing.
And it's almost, what does really anybody know about messenger RNA, except for the fact that we use the terminology? I've likened it to when you're going to pick out a vaccine, if you were going to respond to purchasing a submarine, what would you want? Do you know what you want in your submarine?
No.
And that's kind of the way I equate it. I try to create an analogy and say, I have no idea. Maybe I'd end up getting one with screen doors instead. So that would be a problem. And so
That would be a problem.
as a regular person that's walking around, I'm not a big immunology buff, and I don't understand the risk benefit ratio. Even in regular medicine, when we're dealing with hypertension, what we don't get people to take their hypertension medicine because guess what? It doesn't, having high blood pressure doesn't make you feel bad. If not having COVID doesn't make you feel bad, but you get the vaccine, you feel bad for a day.
It's probably a conversation for another day, but there's far too much information on the internet. And let's face it, if I go on the internet and put in COVID, Lord knows what I'm going to get. And I don't have the knowledge to segregate what is good information and what is bad information. So you got to talk to your physician. You got to talk to your pharmacist.
Whoever your provider is, absolutely have a conversation with them. For folks that are in our area that are listening to this, we're available here at the clinic, whether you're here or you can call in. We have an email site that you can email us on things and ask questions. We'd be happy to answer any of those questions for you because it's difficult to disseminate the information.
Now, to be fair, too, to the people who are listening, most likely there will be some reaction to the shot. Is that fair?
Sure, absolutely. Every vaccine, and the goal of that vaccine is to stir up an immune reaction that's going to be remembered by the body. There are some basic things to an immune reaction that we're going to see with a vaccine, regardless of what it is. Could be shingles, could be measles, could be mumps, could be hepatitis, could be COVID, flu. And that syndrome that we experience is one that's really just demonstrating what the immune system does and produces for symptoms. So injection site pain, we get some of that. And honestly, mine was worse than a flu shot, but not horrible. Lasted for a couple of days. Some lethargy, sometimes folks experience headache, maybe a sore throat. Some may develop a fever. And actually, when we talk to people, it's kind of funny because they'll say they had these symptoms, and I'll say, that's fantastic, because that demonstrates that your body displayed a nice immune reaction to it that it's probably going to remember, but you cannot get an infection from it. You simply get those symptoms that mimic it.
So if you get sick, it's good.
If you get sick, it's good. And it's short lasting. I tell people you're definitely permitted to moan and groan for a full day afterwards if you need to. You should, in your house, you should take command of the remote control, the couch, get a blanket, get something to hydrate with, preferably not alcoholic. That's not good to hydrate with. Water, juice, stuff like that. And really, for most folks, 24 hours, 48 hours is pretty much it. We have a lot of people that come in on Fridays anticipating that the weekend's going to be there. Just think, you can sit around and watch football all weekend.
Well, I will get my shot today, and I will probably sit around and watch football all
and
day.
You get to have the remote control.
I'm the only one in my house. I get,
you get it
the
anyway.
remote control.
Who's going to make you the chicken soup, though?
I'll get some from you before I get it.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Can you get the flu shot and the COVID the same day, or should you not?
You can. So folks, probably we see that come in the clinic, it's about a 50-50. Folks that have probably a more hectic schedule elect to get them together just to get it over with. Folks that maybe have the ability to schedule differently may schedule differently simply because with flu, some folks get more symptoms and might get a symptom similar to that. Some aches, pains, fever, sore throat kind of stuff with that. And if you get the COVID, a lot of that mimics that. So together, you might get a little bit more. You need the remote control for an extra day or something like that. But it is safe. If you were to come in and get both the flu and COVID together, we would try to administer, one in each arm. If it's impossible to do that, we can do them in the same arm, just separated by an inch or so. But medically, it's safe. There's no contraindication to receiving it.
Jim, the other one out there, which I know nothing about, and I think there's a lot of confusion about, is RSV.
Sure.
What is that, and who should get it?
So RSV is a vaccine we just were able to have available to us now. It's being produced by two manufacturers. RSV stands for a bug called Respiratory Syncytial Virus. There's always been a virus that we thought about and worried about in most of the pediatric cases. Again, it's a respiratory one, so the spread is very similar. What we saw that's a little bit different with it is we saw it enter primarily into our long-term care area, where we have folks, that are housed together, and it's not a confined space, but you might have 100 people living in a facility, and so respiratory spread can be more common for whatever reason. And I don't know. We saw a number of cases that developed last year. We saw cases that developed along with the flu. So for folks, again, with concomitant illnesses, 60 or over, and those that are immunocompromised, we see some similar respiratory issues, some breathing issues with respiratory syncytial virus. It does not carry the same lethality that COVID covered early on, but it's certainly one that confuses the picture, that causes some more illness, that causes more taxing of the medical system. And it's a vaccine that is available and recommended for anyone over 60 that has some concomitant illnesses. We can probably go into a lot more specifics about it at a point when you have some more time, but it is going to have a lot of those respiratory symptoms causing respiratory difficulty for individuals.
Do you think COVID is going to be with us for a while?
I think what we're going to see, and gosh, I'm no expert or ability to predict anything. Your guess is almost as good as mine. I'm going to give you that. But I think it's here. And I think it's going to be incorporated kind of into our society, just like influenza is, just like the common cold is. We just have more on our selection, on our menu now. So we have, the typical adenoviruses that cause cold. We had, flu A, flu B. And actually, honestly, a number of colds, I can't remember the exact percentage, but somewhere around probably 30 or 40% of colds actually are also a COVID in their genealogy, so to speak. They're just varieties that didn't have that lethality to them.
Do you think there'll ever be a time when the flu and the COVID shots are sort of combined into one?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because we've been anticipating that. From what I read, the manufacturer of those vaccines, their goal is to have the vaccine available not for 2025. The goal would be, it's a messenger RNA vaccine. It exists already, but it's in clinical trials. These clinical trials are going to go a little bit slower. It's going to take a little bit more time to collect information. Before, we had millions of people ill with COVID. Now we have fewer, so that makes for a longer clinical trial. But the goal is to have that shot available for the 2025 season. That'll be combined flu and COVID. And so you really won't know the difference. It's going to be blended in.
And when you refer to clinical trials, I think it's important to understand that the COVID shots that we're currently administering are indeed clinically safe. That doesn't mean someone's not going to have a bad reaction. It doesn't mean, God forbid, that there might be a very small exception where something serious happens, but I can get in my car, which is reasonably safe, and something could happen.
Exactly.
So this is not voodoo medicine, so to speak.
We have given, though, with COVID, we have given billions. We're in multiple billions worldwide of shots. And so the clinical experience that you gain by actually using an agent, the drug, a vaccine, whatever it is tremendous. If you look at a typical drug that's been developed, for example, by a manufacturer and released on the market, so they also go through the phase one, the preclinical trials in the phase 1, 2, 3, where we've seen the COVID that exists under EUA. That's the emergency use authorization. So we've seen both Moderna and Pfizer have developed their vaccines to where they're in what we call now phase 4, because they're vaccines that are FDA licensed and commercially available. They were under EUA, under what's called a clinical trial 3. Drugs that you would see, for example, advertised on TV for whatever the condition, you see them for psoriatic arthritis and migraine and aches and pains and whatever. Those drugs in clinical trials, typically on average, the exposure of individuals during clinical trials is only in the number of thousands. So it could be 3, 4, 5,000 people have had that
as
drug
opposed to billions
before it's actually been approved. We get most of our experience from what we call phase 4. Phase 4 is when a drug is already licensed by the FDA. It's able to be provided by any provider that has a medical license to prescribe. So there may be only 5,000 people, worldwide that took a drug, and you have a commercial for it and you go to your provider and they're able to prescribe it. With COVID, each leg of the trial, even early on, consisted of over 35,000 people.
And I think that's an important point to make, because what I've heard is people think, well, they want me to get another one because the other ones were bad. No, these things have been clinically tested.
That's
and
the
as you said,
progression.
Jim, billions of people have gotten
Correct.
them.
That's the
Now, if
progression.
somebody, to wrap this up, wants to come to LECOM to get their flu, their COVID, or their RSV, what do they do?
We would love to have them. First, I'll get off the table here for RSV. What we're going to do is refer you to one of our 2 pharmacies that we have on Peach Street and then over on West 38th Street. We have the Colonial Family Pharmacy that's, I can't remember the number, 50-something Peach over by the mall, where the Pier 1 Imports is. And then the Westminster for RSV, we're going to refer you there for now. We might be doing that here in the future. But influenza and COVID, we're here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 until 4. Would love to have you.
Should people make an appointment?
You can make an appointment if you wish. You can call in, you can email in. We still have the Eventbrite site that's running also that you can book through there, but we're very open for walk-ins as well. We would ask if you have a pediatric, someone under 12 years old, because that's a little bit different vaccine. If you're able to call ahead or email us ahead, that would be great, so we can make sure you're ready. We always have a nurse here during those
And make
hours.
sure the children
It's
get a little
pediatric.
special
And
treatment.
yeah, we have
private for the kids.
some crayons, some good.
When somebody comes, Jim, what should they bring?
Really, all you need is some sort of a photo identification of any sort. Bring your insurance card. The newest regulations actually require that employers at least provide something in coverage for COVID. Now, it's possible there would be a copay, and early on, the insurance companies are still kind of creating their world of what they do for compensation. However, your insurance will cover it to some degree or fully. There is a clause for companies that are under 50 employees, but we can work around that. We'll run your eligibility and determine that even prior to, so you would know if there was anticipated any financial responsibility.
Final question. What if I lost my COVID card?
Oh,
I'm not saying I
no.
did, but what perhaps should I do if I lost my COVID card?
That's never happened before.
I'm not saying that it did, but if I did lose my COVID card, should I be hesitant to come?
Absolutely not. We have tons of those that exist. We're actually, for some people, on page 3 already of their COVID card. So we have the ability to look up on our state immunization site any shots that you got in the past for COVID and actually for other conditions. Now, if you had your injections administered outside of state, we may have to make a couple of phone calls, but don't let that stop you. We're going to make sure you got
Call us at
information.
LECOM. We'll get you in almost
Absolutely.
immediately, and we'll take care of your needs, whether it's flu
Right.
or COVID, or refer you if you need the RSV.
And we're ready for you right now. We're ready for a shot at any minute.
I'm sure you are. Jim, I want to thank you for all you and your people do to keep us safe and keep us well. This has been Monsignor Rubino for LECOM.
But I do have a
Matters.
special shot for you.
Jim, I am sure you have a special shot.
I brought it along here.
Did you?
So the one I have for you here, Monsignor,
Is that
is
filled?
especially developed. Yes. So
Is
when we're ready.
that when we're ready? Is that all filled with COVID?
Yeah. So we'll have this one for you because I'm concerned. I want to make sure you get enough of the vaccine. So I brought this one along. I think if we do a couple of doses of this,
A couple of doses of that, and I'll be in good shape.
I think you'll be in good shape.
This is Monsignor Rubino for LECOM.
Take a couple
Health
of days off
Matters.
afterwards. Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Thank you.